Room by Emma Donoghue. I have not seen the film yet. I just want to put that out before I start this, just so people know what kind of biases is coming from. I haven't seen the film yet, but I did read it because I want to see the film eventually, and like reading books first. Now that's out of the way, we can resume. Main thing I really want to focus on for this is narration, because I feel like the narration really makes this book, and as such it kind of made me think about narration styles more while reading it. Predominantly, if anyone didn't know, Room is about a 5-year-old boy who was born into a room because his ma has been kidnapped and kept there, and so she falls pregnant from her captor with Jack, and he now lives in this room, never know anything different. I don't want to go any further in case anyone doesn't know how the story goes and trying to avoid spoilers, but that's predominantly the premise. But the whole thing is told from Jack's point of view, so it's a 5-year-old boy telling this story. And it really changes the whole dynamic of the book. It is carried out so effectively. She does such a wonderful job of keeping up. There wasn't a part of me at any point in this book doubted that a 5-year-old boy was telling me this story. It felt so realistic and tangible because of it. I think it was a really clever idea because it got round describing some of the more awkward scenes, because as it was done from a child's perspective, one, wasn't full understanding, and two, they're hidden from it a bit more. So in some ways it was, when she was like writing about the rape and things of his mother, it was told through his point of view, so it's more the sounds and things he hears. So as an adult you understand what's going on, but you don't specifically have to read it, which is quite nice, to be honest. So that was pleasant. And it also makes the book a lot more, I think, emotional. I feel a lot more emotionally attached and moved and affected by the story because it was being told from a child's perspective. Even again, you're going back to the example, which is actually quite a small portion of the very tiny section of the book, but it's the thing that's, I suppose, stays quite prominently with me while in Room, is when Jack's describing the rape of his mother, he's explaining what's happening as he can hear it. He doesn't actually understand what's happening. And when he can hear it and he's describing it, it made almost the situation worse, because you understand that he doesn't have any understanding of what's happening to him and to his mother, and that's really sort of sad, and it really hit me emotionally, I think, because it was a child. I think it had a different impact than if it was being told by an omniscient narrator, or even from the mother's point of view. So that was really interesting to me, and it kind of made me realise how much narration makes or break a book. It completely changed the flavour of the book. It made it so unique and so interesting to read. In some parts it did make it harder to read or more tedious, because, as I said, it did feel like the whole way through a 5-year-old boy was telling you this story. And I don't know if anyone's ever sat down and listened to a 5-year-old tell them a story, but for a long period of time it can sometimes get quite difficult, because you're basically having to dissect what they're saying half the time, because maybe their vocabulary is not as good as it should be, or their expression or formation of sentences isn't what you'd want it to be to have an adult conversation. Obviously they're 5, you wouldn't expect it to be. They also have a very different view of the world that somewhat seems illogical, and so sometimes it was quite difficult. It was hard going to both understand what he was saying sometimes, but also to persevere, because in places it did feel slightly tedious. Not the plot, but the style of narration. But I think that also added to it, again, because it made it more believable and you became more emotionally invested. So it was both the best thing about the book and, I would argue, the weakest point about the book. But it still made it really enjoyable. I did really enjoy reading this book. I think it was such a unique premise and idea. I've never read anything like this before, both because of plot. I understand there's probably other books about similar themes, but I've personally never read one, and I also have never read one written from the perspective of a 5-year-old child before, so that was really interesting and, to me, quite inventive and unique, and I really sort of focused on it, and it's definitely the thing I think in years to come I'm going to remember about this book, is not necessarily the plot or the struggle or anything like that. It'd be the narration style and how well she does it, because I still can't quite believe how good it is. It's so consistent and well formed and developed. She really understands the character of Jack, and I really like that. In some ways he's so much smarter, I was going to say cleverer, he's so much smarter than a 5-year-old should be, and he's so much more advanced in his understanding, and in other ways he's so much more underdeveloped and constricted by what he's doing, and it's so interesting to see how he's piecing things together, working things out, connections he's making, and his relationship with his mother or his ma, and it's so brilliant. I definitely think it's worth reading. I really want to see the film. Hopefully I can still get a chance to see it, but I think I'm going to have to wait now until it comes out of cinemas, because I kind of missed it at the cinema. Wasn't very many showings, and that really upset me, especially as it's on the Oscars list. I do like a good Oscars film, but I did pick it up because I wanted to see the film, but I'm really glad I did. It was just fantastic. It was so clever, it was so simple. It wasn't based on real life, but you obviously understand that there have been stories like this, and so it does make you think about those stories. It definitely had a very big emotional effect on me because of the narration. As I've stated, I felt more emotionally connected, but it also made me feel very uncomfortable about what happened, especially as when it happened to her, she was my age, and so that kind of made it slightly terrifying at points. I remember one night when I read before I go to bed, so just before I went to bed, I stopped and I really was getting freaked out for a bit, just about the thought and the concept of it, which I wasn't expecting from this book. It definitely is going to be quite triggering for some people, I think, but it's really, really good, and I think if you're okay with that, I would definitely read it. I would give, yeah, as I said, I would give warnings. If you're sensitive to those kind of issues, I probably wouldn't read this, but if you're not, and this kind of thing interests you, I definitely think it's worth reading. For narration style alone, the way this book is written is fantastic. I definitely think it's going to become a classic. Like in years to come, I can imagine people saying you've still got to read this book, and it will still feel as relevant and as poignant, which in some ways is quite sad. I hope it doesn't remain as relevant and poignant, and it's more looked at as an historical piece for its writing skill and the reflection of society. The cynic in me feels like it's still going to be as relevant, which is a shame. But there you go. So I would probably give this book, I'd give this book 9 out of 10. I think it was fantastic. I'm going to go quite high. I'd knock one off because I think it's quite, it didn't always make me feel good while reading it, which I know sometimes it's good not to always feel good, but something about it. Otherwise it was really, really good, and I recommend it to many people. You should all read it. I hope everyone is well, and I will see you all soon.